It wraps up its work before the holiday break. The spotlight has been on Eskom this week, from former CEO Brian Molife's 13 million rand payout in question. Two unsigned letters from two different law firms alleging to being representing AJ Gupta, to chairperson Khoza taking the hot seat, and the presence of the Hawks in the room. Meanwhile, SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane has revealed that he's reinstated senior tax official Jonas Makwakwa to his job, whilst an investigation into whether or not he is guilty of tax avoidance or evasion is still underway. Patricia Williams, South African Institute of Tax Professional, joins me now in studio. From our studios in Pretoria, we have the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse CEO Ben Turon. Thanks you very much for joining us, and welcome to the both of you. So maybe let me start with you, Patricia, and let's talk a little bit about SARS, and because this, as the Practitioners Association, are you concerned about the goings-on at SARS? Because this institution has to create confidence, it has to be the bastion of all that is good and right. And when we read about these issues and hear about people who have got a grey cloud being allowed to come back to work, it's perhaps not so inspiring.
Not at all. And that's one of the issues. I know that it's a little bit philosophical to say there's no objective reality, there's only perception, but for the normal taxpayer, it really matters what the perception is. And it has a very, very significant impact on tax compliance. And at a time when we have a 50 billion rand shortfall for this year, and predicted for the next year is almost 70, and the year after almost 90 billion. That was announced in the medium-term budget policy statement. It's extremely important that SARS gets back on track to collect taxes to fund the whole country.
You talk about tax compliance. What sort of things can we see if people feel sufficiently disgruntled?
Well, if you look at the tax compliance or the tax collections reports this year, it definitely looks like people are not paying their taxes as they should, that they're already taking some actions. If it's already showing this year, it's probably tax evasion, not tax avoidance, because tax avoidance usually takes a little bit of planning. So the steps that people are taking right now for tax avoidance, we'll probably only see next year or the year after the significant decreases in taxes. But if you look at our decreased growth rate, that only explains approximately 20 billion rand of our 50 billion rand shortfall, and the rest you start wondering, what are people doing?
All right, let me turn to you, Mr. Turon. Your thoughts as outer about the goings-on at SARS?
We are very worried. If you look at the track record over the last few years, and specifically recently with Tom Moyane being appointed, there's been an outflow of good people, and there's often about 5 o'clock the news broke that says that 500 people have left the organization this year. Those are qualified people with an average of 17 years of experience, and that is scary because they're critical in terms of making sure the country can work.
So the way I understood what Mr. Moyane and SARS representatives were saying is that, particularly with Mr. Makwakwa, they've done all that they can do with the legislations that guides them as an authority, and that the rest is now up to SARS. Is that good enough for you?
Hogwash. First of all, Hogan Lovel should not have accepted the scope of work as it was. Now in Parliament it comes to light that what's happening at the moment is to say that PwC is still busy with investigation, the Hawks is still busy with the investigation, so we brought the man back while that other criminal investigations are going on. That's unacceptable. Previously, what is being said now is that the maximum time that somebody ought to be suspended is 2 months, and now it's been a year, so we have to bring him back. Previously, people were suspended for more than that. If you just the recent past, you have the Commissioner of Police was on suspension for 4 years before she went on retirement. So we believe it's hogwash. It's just a nice excuse to bring him back. We want to find out why he's been brought back, because if they gotten by with him for a year, why suddenly does he have to come back? And then, of course, the other issue is about the bonus that we need to talk about.
All right, so when Outer first came to prominence, you were fighting e-tolls and you led an e-toll revolution. Are you going to do the same with tax?
We are not ready to make that move yet. Remember, once you do what's the name? If you do that with a tax, it's extremely difficult to get back on track. So the problem that we have is we've got to maintain what we have, and we've got to keep building in this country. We are extremely scared of a tax revolution, and we want to avoid that at all costs, because it does not take long for a country to go down a slippery slope. And once you're on that slope, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get back. Because once people get used to not paying tax, how do you get them to pay tax afterwards?
Ms. Williams, what are your clients actually saying to you? You know, you as an association, you sit with clients and they talk and they say things to you. No one wants to pay tax, but what are they saying to you given what's playing out at the moment?
Well, at various stages, people have never been fond of paying tax. It's not like you're especially excited that it's deducted off your salary, but there was a great pride in the South African Revenue Service as one of the top government-related institutions. So people took a great pride in that, and they were pleased that their taxes were being used for things like actually, building roads, electrifying communities. You had a lot of pride into this, and the social grants, so that people were actually trying to help people out of poverty. But now there's a very different feel to it. I myself often feel like paying tax ends up being the immoral thing to do, because you're feeling, what's happening with my money? Am I just feeding a machine that's working other than it should be working? And you start having personal and ethical reservations about paying your taxes. Of course, you still have the law that you need to pay your taxes, but then you have people starting to wonder, are there ways that they can try and minimize their taxes? And that's the tax avoidance issue. But then you get a lot of other people. The easiest way to not pay your taxes, for example, and what a lot of our clients are doing, we're seeing a lot of immigration. People are saying, how can I immigrate? How can I get my money out? How can I reduce the value of my taxable estate within South Africa and rather set up something offshore? How can you get the exchange control advice that you requested and how to get your money out? And that's what people are doing there. And the transactions, instead of reinvesting, when people are taking money in terms of the M&A transactions, a lot of people are taking their money and taking it out instead of reinvesting, instead of contributing back into society.
Have you noticed a deterioration in the functioning of SARS? We heard from Mr. Turan about the losses of key staff. As people that interact with SARS all the time, are you seeing a shift or a deterioration in functioning at SARS?
Absolutely. So at Bowmans, we often have to do advanced tax rulings for people, and then you get situations like you apply for a ruling. In terms of the law, you're supposed to get the ruling, but no one in SARS actually wants to give it to you because they don't like what it says. Now, there's nothing in the law that allows them to refuse to give you a ruling, but they just don't. And then things like trying to get settlement negotiations. You want to resolve this matter, you want the dispute finished, you want to just settle, pay what you must pay and move on with your life. And then you struggle to have settlement negotiations with SARS because people are very nervous to make decisions. Because if you are, there's certainly a perception, if you're in the wrong side of things, if you're connected to the wrong people in SARS, anything you do can and will be used against you. So you have a lot of SARS officials kind of scared to do their job, or certainly that's how it seems to the tax lawyers who are working with them. And then the very scary things, which of course were brought to light in the tax ombuds investigation into delayed refunds, the absolutely astounding things that SARS are doing, like raising assessments in journals to take money as soon as it shows as a credit on your account and delaying paying refunds. Those kinds of things, yes, you may have had problems in the past, but they were never so severe. It certainly feels to me, and I've been working in tax for over 20 years, and it certainly feels to me like we're in an absolutely unprecedented situation now.
When did it start? I mean, Mr. Turan is going to say Mr. Moyane, who was the author of this period of time. Did it start now, or has this been in the brewing for a while?
It's certainly been coming for the last few years, so it's difficult to pinpoint exactly when, but things have certainly been getting worse, and I would say the last 2 years has been particularly bad.
Okay. Mr. Turan, are we seeing politics more than anything else playing out here?
We are very worried that it's more than just politics. If you remember the book, The Present Keepers, there's a lot of allegations being made there that speaks about protectionism, the fact that the key people were taken out of SARS because they were investigating high-profile cases. We've had rumors of high-profile individuals that are being protected, that are not paying taxes, and that need to be investigated. But nobody's investigating, and if you, day by day, the more you listen to what's happening at SARS, the more worried we become. Remember, without a functioning SARS, South Africa cannot exist and cannot survive. And it's important that the credibility be re-established. It's important that the trust of the community and South Africans get re-established in there, so that people feel pride and proud to pay the taxes. Patricia raised a very interesting thing. She said that it's almost a moral problem at the moment to pay taxes, and that's a scary place to be for South Africans.
What is the most pressing questions that you have for, let's say, Mr. Moyane, because he's in charge of SARS, but the authority in general?
There's a number of questions that we need to ask him. Is why did you decimate the investigative abilities of SARS? That answer has never been given. Why is he bringing back people that, in fact, should still be outside and not be part of the organization? Mr. Makwakwa and his wife, I think it's now. And then second and thirdly, why are they not honest about the under collection when it comes to the taxes this year? People share information with us, and the under collection is grossly understated. Add to the problem, currently the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Energy is now trying to get nuclear going. You cannot do those things without having a decent income and the revenue services up and running properly. This country is running out of money, and we need to take that seriously, and nobody is at the moment. So if you go to Parliament today, there's not one person that says this is the reason. Everybody denies knowing something. Everybody says it's not me, and it's always somebody else. People must start taking accountability for what is happening in this country, and they are not.
Ms. Williams, I mean, help me, because as far as I know, my tax comes off my salary, and so I don't even get involved in the process. You just hand that over. Accountants have got to follow the rules because they get audited, and they hand the money over. How do we get to an under-collection scenario?
Well, it is something that has been puzzling a lot of people, particularly when you see the substantial under-collection on personal income tax. And you'd be thinking, people are not just earning less this year than last year, but somehow there's less personal tax being collected. So obviously there's some things that one can do to reduce one's taxes even as a salaried employee, like making donations to charitable organizations that qualify as public benefit organizations. Then people are doing things like taking pay cuts. They're saying, I'm going to work less hours, and then I will rather do some work on my own, side jobs, side things where I'm perhaps not going to take the money out of my company. I'm just going to leave it there, or I'm going to start something up, or I'm going to start. I've seen people, especially with the delayed VAT refunds, all the people who have VAT refunds are actually earning money from overseas. So then they start saying, well, why do I need to be in South Africa? I could actually spend more of my time overseas. And then, of course, the immigration, a lot of loss of skilled people, so then their whole salary is lost to SARS.
Now, we've seen abroad corporations re-headquartering and setting up sort of tax vehicles in other countries. Are we seeing an increase of that in South Africa?
So with the increase in dividends tax this year, when dividends tax first came out, non-residents had to pay the 5%, with the reduced treaty rate, and it was 10% for South Africans. And then it went up to 15%. And now it's gone up to 20%. And we'll see what it goes up to in February now. So now, instead of paying double, which you used to pay as a South African on your dividends tax, now you're paying 4 times the amount. It definitely makes people who are internationally mobile think very seriously about having their dividends flow offshore in such a way so that they can pay a quarter of the tax, of the dividends tax. So things like that, definitely internationally mobile people and internationally mobile businesses have a lot of opportunity. And then, of course, to the transfer pricing. You can pay expenses here, deduct the tax here, and have the income in another jurisdiction with lower tax rates. So a lot of possibilities.
Mr. Turon, as we start to wrap up, the parliamentary inquiry into Eskom, we saw the Hawks arrive looking for information about the chairperson. What do you make of that? I mean, this is also, I guess, something that must concern you.
When the chairperson came back, she very specifically said it was a misunderstanding. And I'm very scared to make that bigger than what it ought to be. And only time will tell when they reopen in January whether this was in fact an intimidation factor or was it absolutely an innocent process. The most innocent explanation that we can think of is that the Hawks were supposed to be there before the meeting. They wanted to contact her about clarification, investigation, supporting the organization, and therefore it was a very innocent discussion. The fact that they interrupted the meeting, somebody went up to her and said, there's a piece of paper, the Hawks want to speak to you, smacks of intimidation. But it's a bit early to make that judgment, and what I'd recommend we do is to be quiet about it until January, because if something happens over the next 6 weeks or so until they reopen, we will know whether this has been intimidation or whether it's just been an innocent mistake.
All right, so we've run out of time. So to both of you, I just want to say thank you very much indeed. Mr. Ben Turon, the CEO of Outer, talking to us from Pretoria, and also here in studio, Patricia Williams from the South African Institute of Tax Professionals. Thank you very much indeed for your insights, both of you. Thank you for your time.